Hello and welcome to today's webinar, WMS Market Analysis and Key Takeaways from the 2024 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Warehouse Management Systems. I'm your host, Renee Trutman. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Made4Net, and I'm joined today by an esteemed panel of experts from Alpine Supply Chain Solutions, Invista, Zion Solutions Group, and Made4Net. I'm going to give each panelist a moment to introduce themselves before we get started. David Myers, let's start with you.
Hey, thank you, Renee. I'm a senior director with Alpine Supply Chain Solutions. I've been working in the supply chain technology space for more than 25 years, first as a user, then becoming responsible for the applications for supply chain within the business, and then eventually becoming a consultant where we do assessing, selection, and implementation of supply chain systems.
Excellent. Tom?
Thank you, Renee, and good afternoon, attendees. My name is Tom Streeter. I'm a vice president, one of the partners at Invista. Like David, I have extensive experience in implementing solutions in labor management and warehouse management, and I'm excited to be here today.
Thanks, Tom. Drew?
Drew Eubank, EVP of Engineering and Execution at Zion. I'm also one of the co-founders. We're a full-service integrator. About 23 years of experience in the space. 60% of it is an actual operator called a concrete walker, and the last little bit in material handling.
Great, thanks. And Amit?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amit Levy, Executive Vice President, Sales and Marketing and Strategy here at Made4Net. We are a WMS vendor, a global WMS vendor, and been in this space for the past 20 years. My experience and background is in supply chain execution, sales, consulting, and implementation. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. And one note for our audience today before we get started. At the end of our discussion, we'll have time for a short Q&A, so feel free to submit questions as they come to mind, and we'll be sure to circle back to them at the end of the discussion. All right, so with that, let's dive into the report. So Gartner published the 2024 Magic Quadrant for Warehouse Management Systems on May 2nd. They started the process by considering over 80 WMS providers, and 20 providers are included in the report. And this was up from 18 vendors in 2023. And I'm curious if anything surprised you about this year's Magic Quadrant. And I was also hoping, Tom, you could give us a little bit of an overview of the quadrant and what people are seeing here. And so, Tom, let's kick that off with you.
Great, thanks, Renee. So when you take a look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant, it is a piece of information that gets published on an annual basis. It probably goes back 20 to 25 years. Ever since I've been in the space, I've come across the Magic Quadrant. I think everyone knows who Dwight Klapich is and Simon Tunstall, kind of the leading analysts at Gartner who lead this research. They also do other research across other supply chain execution platforms like transportation management systems, planning systems, et cetera. But this is probably one that they're very well known for. Just the construction of the grid itself. You've got an X and Y axis. The X axis is the vision of the vendor. So are they in tune with the market? In executing, how the market is evolving, and then the y-axis is really talks about their ability to execute. So across their portfolio of WMS and looking at their customer base, do they have successes in implementing the solution? As Renee pointed out, there were 20 vendors this year, 18 last year. I'll talk about the 2 new vendors, and then I'll have David give some insight onto the other 18. But there's really 2 new vendors in the 2024 version. You've got POSCO entering into the market down in the lower left-hand quadrant called the niche players. Again, don't get caught up in the context of how they're classified. I think the importance is making this is very prestigious. And then the second one is Dematic. And Dematic really enters into the quadrant based on an acquisition of a software platform. So I think for me, kind of the interesting thing that you see the supply chain moving to is, automation becoming a big part of what we see in WMS. And, the acquisition by Dematic kind of puts them now in the software space as well. We all know Dematic is really from a hardware perspective.
Great. Thanks. David, how about you?
Yeah, so far as surprising, not really. The usual suspects are there, the ones that are typically there from year to year. There's a couple in that quadrant. Seems to be in the magic quadrant, the upper right? Seems to be there by default. What is a surprise to me, or a curiosity rather, is how they got there. And it's the ERP vendors. Early on when I was consulting for clients where they were already running an SAP or an Oracle, but they thought that they would certainly gain a tactical, if not strategic advantage from implementing a new WMS or having that capability. We did do a side-by-side comparison, going through what the requirements were, doing the typical scoring that you would expect through that evaluation process. 20 years ago was not even a fair fight. More recently, I can understand the completeness of vision, getting further to the right. Whether it was due to acquisitions of point solutions or other best of breed or up and coming WMSs, or whether they were focused more on R&D. I'll still be skeptical on their plotting on the ability to execute access, but as I would expect, maybe there has not been more recent acquisitions or not lack of focus, but maybe not as much focus on functionality. You see the big three, the 500-pound gorillas, if you will, starting to break away as compared to last year's.
All right. Excellent. Thanks, David.
Renee, I'll just end with this on that last slide. Again, I talked about, and you had mentioned 80 coming in or being evaluated. Again, don't get caught up in, who's in, what particular quadrant. I think you want to use this as a tool to help you with your analysis of what's going to be best for you. And this is just one piece of the puzzle that's out there.
And Tom, if I will, I'm sorry, but that's a great point. A lot of the detail, the Gartner Magic Quadrant report is not just this chart, right? There's a whole lot of detail that goes into this. As they always say, read the fine print, because there is a lot of revealing information.
Yeah, thank you very much. It does go into a deep dive into every single one of these vendors and strengths and cautions and things with every single one of them as well. So great. Thanks very much. Let's jump into the next question. One finding in this year's report is because there is near functional parity for basic core WMS capabilities across the various WMS providers, users are now prioritizing other factors when shopping for a warehouse management system, such as technical architecture, vendor viability, total cost of ownership, and time to value. So with the core WMS capabilities converging, what additional features or functionalities or capabilities do you feel are becoming increasingly important to users? And Amit, let's start this one with you.
Sure, thanks, Renee. So, talking about core WMS functions, this is something that's always been around, in the basic operation of a warehouse, right? You're talking about receiving and put away and picking and loading and shipping, replenishment, and so on and so forth. I believe that users have started putting more emphasis into functionality outside of these core and standard processes. So primarily in the area that's associated with labor. You're looking at task management and task interleaving. While these core functions were driven by the systems, not all WMS systems usually support task management and really strong task interleaving and optimization on the floor. Being able to dynamically prioritize and reshuffle the queue and meet ever-changing requirements. And it could be a priority of an order, it could be a shipment date, and so on and so forth. When you look at a task management engine that's capable of responding dynamically and assigning those tasks based on the real-time needs, this is something that really drives value into the operation and makes the overall labor more efficient. Another function or extended function of a WMS that again brings more value into the labor side of the operation is a labor management system or labor management functionality. Not talking about, KPIs and just basic labor tracking metrics that are available with any WMS. More talking about, the ability to support engineered labor standards, being able to define goal times and calculations of travel time and so on and so forth. So I'll give you a simple example. Let's say John is a forklift driver, and he gets a task to move a pallet from location A to location C. WMS could calculate the time it should take them to execute this task based on travel path, the type of equipment, the speed of the equipment, the accessibility rules that's bolted into that specific task, and possibly also other factors. And then the system would present the goal time to execute this task. Take all that, it brings a lot of value to the operator himself, because he can see the goal time, how much time it's supposed to take him to perform that task, and also the actual execution time once they're done. So the system would take all that, compare it, run the calculation, show them their efficiency, their productivity, and so on and so forth. Add to that utilization of the labor in the warehouse. So this is all part of a strong, labor management that's available with the leading WMS vendors. The last piece, and I'll pause with that, is supply chain convergence. Convergence is where you're looking at more than just the warehouse. So if you're doing any type of yard management and any aspect of transportation that's kind of bolted onto the WMS, that brings also a lot of value to the core WMS functions.
All right, great, thank you, Drew.
Thanks, Renee. I think with more customers moving to more automated systems, with more convergence of different islands of automations, robotics, point-to-point, goods-to-person, sortation, I think one of the core capabilities that really has to come together is to be that middleware bridge, that access to all the different islands of technology and how it all comes together to make a system. Today, that's done through supplemental softwares, bolt-ons, call it WES, WCS on steroids, whatever we want to label that as. I think that's important to users, because the fewer places I have to go to make something happen, the fewer chances I have of missing something or having error, right? It also keeps costs low. The second thing is custom reporting at the user level. I think when you have all these different islands of automation and things are coming through, the standard CAN reporting may or may not be, the customer may not have an appetite for it. So the ability to go in and say, hey, I want to look at these attributes in a different way is highly important for these systems as we evolve.
Excellent, great. Thank you very much, Drew. All right, so soon after the report was published, I sat down with Amit Levy to discuss his thoughts on key takeaways from the report. And we're looking at them here. A few of them are labor challenges, obviously, and rising costs are significant drivers behind investments in warehouse management systems. Second, integrating and optimizing workflows seamlessly across all the stages of business operations is crucial, kind of the point that Drew was just bringing up. Third is a growing number of WMS implementation are now cloud-based deployments. Also, today's WMS buyers really require software that can be easily and quickly customized and adapted to their changing needs. Technical architecture, total cost of ownership, and time to value are really becoming important evaluation criteria as the functionality is being more on parity. And WMS buyers today really want to keep it simple when possible. So let's take a look at the next question. Let's unpack a few of these, starting with the first point. Do you agree that labor challenges and rising costs are main drivers behind investments in warehouse management systems? And are there any other trends that you see playing a role? So Drew, let's start off with you.
I think with anything that comes within the four walls of a distribution center, labor challenges and maintaining costs and keeping cost drivers at bay are always going to be a main purpose for investment. But I also think with the more on-set omni-channel warehouses where you have more channels happening at the same time, you have more complexity. You have returns coming in the same place you're doing retail shipments. We have wholesale shipments coming alongside an e-com facility. I think those trends are making those investments happen as well because you have to be able to service all your customers at all points, right? And a lot of times, legacy customers will have a warehouse that was specialized in one thing, and then another warehouse was specialized in another. The cost to maintain inventory across those sites is different. Buying patterns change. So I think a lot of the changing role of the distribution center and the focus of a distribution center, and it's not for everybody. There are certainly customers that are diverging from an omnichannel perspective, but a lot of customers are still taking that path of if I have all my inventory under one roof and I manage it there, what work streams, what markets can I service? And I think that's driving a large investment.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Tom?
Drew's has done a really good job, up to this point, talking about having that middleware layer. So you're seeing a lot of, the vendors now producing their own piece of integration software that can do all that data transformation. So you're seeing investments there. There's no need to rely on external vendors. Going back to what Drew said, you're not going to miss anything if it's all in-house. He talked about all the types of delivery models. But one of the other things that you're seeing is, again, as all these vendors are being evaluated, from a functionality perspective, we're now down to very small changes in the functionality of the WMS. They can all pick, they can all pack, they can all ship. But you're seeing just a tremendous amount of opportunity on the technology side related to things like multi-tenancies and clouds and single clouds. So again, the days of being on-premise and having lots of hardware, to run the WMSs, those days are pretty much gone. Some clients will gravitate to that, but all of our implementations that we're seeing are now all moving off to the cloud because the risk is kind of been overcome, and clients are more adept to do that.
Excellent. Great. And that actually transitions us in very nicely to our next point, which cloud-based subscription models for acquiring and operating warehouse management software has become increasingly popular. One analyst recently commented that WMS solutions have finally evolved to a cloud-first market where more than 75% of new WMS deals are now cloud. So taking a look at that, with that in mind, how are WMS providers adapting to meet the demand for cloud services and scalability? And is there still a place for on-premise solutions? David, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think overall the major players are adapting well, and certainly the new folks in the market basically are working under that assumption that that is what their service offering should be going in. There are still some concerns. I've heard not too long ago about the ability to get updates and lack of control with receiving and processing those upgrades. Blackout times, how does that work with their schedule? Certainly have an open eye if you're shopping, to have an eye out for that, what that SLA says, what the service level agreement indicates, and what you can expect. And I think mostly gone. Tom, to your point about on-prem going away, I think that is mostly true in certain instances where there's high-speed material conveyor sortation, and there's a decision point needing to be made between the first scan and the first divert. Obviously, if you're going in fresh, you would probably understand that and design for a little bit longer runway. But just as recently as yesterday, I heard a comment from a client. Well, maybe we should consider on-prem. It's a decision that needs to be assessed from folks definitely more technically capable than I am.
Excellent. All right, Amit, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything David and Tom said about the market's going there. It's certainly going there. We saw this in the past few years that it's really booming, and vendors are usually offering more flexibility and more scalability as they go out to the cloud. I think the goal is to establish a state-of-the-art IT experience for the customer of using the WMS in a changing environment, right? And to be able to adapt to the changes of business. The right approach from a deployment standpoint, in my opinion, is to partner with a public vendor like AWS, Azure, GCP, and benefit from all the resources and the product size and infrastructure that's available within these, giant service providers. This way, we as a WMS vendors can offer seamless scalability on demand, just to be able to be flexible from a security standpoint. That it's a huge concern today to any organization. You're much more safe with these large solution providers, and I can say on our behalf that we feel much more confident in working with a service provider like this. As far as the comment about the on-prem, I agree with what with both Tom and David said. There are still customers out there that prefer to go that route. I think it's mostly around being able to manage it on their own because they have a strong IT organization, and from a cost perspective, when they have the ability to do that and they have all the infrastructure in-house, it's less expensive. But not every company has the luxury of being able to support systems like this and have the right infrastructure for this. The other aspect of it is regional concerns, right? So you have certain countries that are in areas where the internet location is not as good. We just signed a contract a couple of weeks ago with a company in Argentina, and where they felt it would make more sense for them to have it all managed on-prem, using their own resources, and just because of stability of the network and the risk of losing a connectivity. So I think there's still place for on-prem. If the option is out there, then there are customers that will still consider using it.
Great. Thanks very much. So at Made for Net, we understand that today's WMS buyers really require software that can be easily and quickly adapted and customized to their needs. And it's been a major driver behind the development of our WMS, which is quick to customize, and because it's based on a flexible rules-based platform. So on that same vein, can you share some insights on the importance of technical architecture in selecting a WMS? And Amit, let's start that one with you.
Sounds good. So, I think that technical architecture is really key to a selection of any mission critical system today. And specifically in the case of a WMS, we all know that the WMS is like, I look at it as the brain of the like you take the brain of the human being. This is the way that you need to look at a WMS where it pertains to the warehouse. It controls everything that happens within the four wall. It synchronizes every part of the operation, and it needs to adapt to different conditions that take place. Exactly like the brain controls the body. The importance of a strong engineering of a WMS system really begins with the adaptability and scalability. I'll give you a few examples. If the software is built in the right way, which enables customer to make changes fast and in a rather simple way without having to put too much effort into coding or needing to reach out to the vendor, in my opinion, this is a huge win. If the WMS architecture enables you to run a small warehouse with basic operation, just because the way that it's built, and then it can scale, to support a much larger operation, more volumes, more user, more technology, more automation, and so on. Again, this is a win. You don't have to buy a new system. You start small and then you grow and expand with the system. This is all about architecture. It's all about the technology and the engineering of how the system is built. One of the core and most important elements of building a system that's designed in the right engineering framework is microservices, which is really taking small components or small processes, breaking them down into small components, and each one of those components kind of handles that specific area, and they talk to each other through APIs. So just as an example, location cubing logic, or cartonization, or sortation logic, just to name a few. Each one of these is an independent microservice that can be called through an API and run the specific functions that it needs to, that it owns. And, it's driven by different events and can be deployed in different processes. So, you can use it in put away, you can use it in pick planning, you can use it in packing. So those are specific components that basically service different type of parts of the operation.
Right. Thanks, Amit. Tom, can you weigh in on the importance of technology and architecture?
Yeah, I'm going to leverage a little bit more on the microservices side for maybe the non-technical part of the audience. So Amit's done a really good job of talking about how this microservice can fit across a wide variety of applications. So I'll give you an example. So in the legacy WMSs, when you built out the functionality, you had to build it from start of the process generally through the end of the process. So you've got a long number of steps that are going through to get, say, a pallet put away and scanned into its location, right? So each one of those interactions with the WMS, pick up the LPN and scan it, scan to the location again. All of those are those microservices that Amit was talking about. And you can use those across your whole other parts of your organization, right? Or other parts of your processes. And again, he talked about scaling. So again, the ability to take those small little components or those microservices and build it into a technology that allows for that scaling makes for really good ability to get to faster time to value and rapid deployment. And again, from the testing and training side, again, not having to go through that whole put away process to prove that a new step is going to be viable, and just taking a look at the microservice itself allows for that rapid deployment. That's a way that an operation can look at it. Hey, I'm evaluating a possible change. If I have a microservices structure, it allows for a rapid deployment.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much. All right. So labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and demand surges are continuing to drive organizations to invest in robotics. But research indicates that more than 80% of warehouses currently have no automation at all. So how do you see the role of automation and robotics really evolving in warehouse management systems to meet these changing market demands? Amit, let's start with you.
All right, thanks, Renee. So yeah, I think automation is huge, and everywhere you go in today's whether it's conferences or trade shows and so on, I think it's all about automation. Automation is not new in warehousing; it's been there for many years. What has changed, I think, is the variety and the complexity of these automation solutions. In the past, we always had goods to person. I'm talking about 20, 25, 30 years ago even. Automation in the form of high bay systems, right? Mini loads, carousels. And today we just see a larger variety of automation. So if we talk about ASRS, you see systems like AutoStore or Exotech, just to name a few, that are much more efficient, flexible, and they just kind of augment the traditional solutions. On the autonomous mobile robots, AMRs, we see solutions, that handle sortations, that do picking human support, picking arms, transport robots, and so on and so forth. What is more interesting is the collaboration between those different type of solution and the human resources within each one of the facilities where they're installed. And the WMS kind of serves as the orchestrator and the synchronizer of each one of those elements. So you have different type of automation solutions within the facility, and you have people, and you need to make sure that you optimize those resources within a single engine that can oversee the overall activity within the warehouse. To give you a quick example, taking an order, breaking it down into different areas, where you have, in one area you have picking bots that run between aisles and support multiple pickers, and then another part of that order is sent to a VLM or to a mini load, where you have all these small items that you pick into a tote. Both of those operations need to be synchronized, and you need to ultimately deliver them into a packing station where a packer puts it into a box, prints the label, and ships it to the customer. So the synchronization from a timing perspective is unique. With labor costs rising and shortage in labor overall challenges, I think automation will continue to evolve. I attended a Gartner symposium a couple of weeks ago, and automation along with AI was huge. It was, everybody was just talking about automation and AI and so on and so forth. So, this is something that's growing. And I'll just add one more comment about this. The whole concept of automation as a service and robots as a service takes it to a different perspective, from an investment perspective, right? So, instead of having this as traditionally as a CapEx, where you have to invest millions of dollars and spend millions of dollars in putting automation projects together, today, most vendors go to an approach of selling this as a service. It's a monthly fee. And again, it could be, not only the software that we're all used to, but the actual robots, the actual automation solution as well. It makes it much more easier to absorb to any customer that wants to take the next steps.
Excellent. Tom?
Yeah, leveraging off what Amit talked about, there's really no one size fits all when it comes to robotics, and I'll focus on the robotics side. Gartner has been, highly talking about robotics like the market has, and all of the, the vendors that are producing, these types of available solutions to the end users, right? Gartner has identified 34 different types of robotics that are out there that's going to fit the warehousing, manufacturing space. So again, you've got to do a lot of background to find out what's going to be the right solution. But what does that mean? Let's go back to what Drew had mentioned. You got to have that piece of middleware that's going to be able to adapt all those different types of solutions. And oh, by the way, you may not have the same robot brand. You may have multiple robot brands, and Gartner calls that intralogistics robotics. So again, that flexible middleware is going to be, key to be able to scale up and scale down, which Amit talked about on that robotics as a service. Renee, you had said, the study is showing 80%. I just read an article, in Modern Materials Handling that says, that may be closer to 90%, and that comes from a robotics, manufacturer. So there may be a little bit of skewing of data, to support their side of the equation. But again, that same article talked about how that, that AMR may cost $30,000 to buy outright. So again, it goes back to what Amit said, using it as a robot, as a service, and use it as needed. That's going to be a big thing. And then that again goes back to that microservices discussion that Amit and I just had. Scaling up and scaling down when you need that service is going to be key, which again goes back to having a strong technical platform.
Excellent. Great feedback on automation, and maybe AI would be a good one to peel the onion on for our next webinar.
Renee, one more comment before we move on to the next question. Just, need to remember, robots and any other automation a component of an operation, they don't get tired, right? They don't need a break. They don't need time off. They just keep working. Now, the question is, are they going to completely replace people? Probably not. And, we'll always have people within the operation, but I think that they take a much larger portion of running those facilities and just, augmenting the human resources and collaborating with them. And that's what we're going to see, in my opinion, in the future, more collaboration between people and robots, and then robots and robots, right? Different type of robots that just take ownership of different type of parts of the operation.
Yeah, that's a great point, Amit. Again, don't think of it as robots, eliminating the labor, right? Because it's gonna create new jobs, and with today's young workforce, they're looking for those opportunities. So if you are able to put a robot and do a lot of that manual picking, somebody's got to be able to service that robot, right? So there's opportunities for job growth within the market just there from the and more of that end user perspective, right?
Yeah, excellent point. Great. Thank you. All right. So the WMS market is projected to grow from about 4 billion in 24 to 8.6 billion by 29. This indicates that many companies will be seeking a new WMS solution over the next 5 years. So question is, how do you determine when it's the right time to transition to a new WMS? Drew, let's start this with you.
Well, this is going to be unique to every organization, right? What do you have internal resource wise? What are you trying to accomplish? We go back to the whole, conversation on omni-channel and the different functions and different markets we're serving inside of a warehouse. To me, the biggest time to transition is when the one you're using today, whether you're using a system or not, doesn't keep up with your demand and your growth strategies. Where are you trying to get to? Is it going to stop you from servicing the customer? I think that a lot of the onset of technology we're seeing today was driven by COVID, which scared everybody, right? If I can't get my widget out to my customer, I can't make revenue. So now market share suddenly becomes an ROI. And when your current system can't scale to help you meet your customers where they're at, so you can maintain and then grow your market share, it's time to look into it. At the same time, if your internal cost to maintain the system you have today keep growing without any end in sight, the providers may be sunsetting that piece of technology. So the advancements you need to get to the next level, to do the next step, is too much. It's time to start looking for a new system. Internally, if you're going, hey, do I need a new system? Your gut's probably going to be right. It's probably time to start at least looking at what's going on, because you know your operation the best.
Excellent. David, have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with what Drew said. If you're looking at a system that's out of support and you're doing everything you can internally to keep it rolling, yeah, certainly that's a decision point. Strategically, Tom from Invista and I have a mutual client, and it was a corporate merger. Each company had its own unique technology stack and diverse distribution networks, and that was really one of the decision points based upon just one of them, but a fairly significant driver. Hey, look, if we standardize our platform, the ERP in that case, but also the WMS across our networks, there's going to be a huge savings, and that expected return was significant. Not sure of the actual or documented or public return yet, but it was really attractive. And excluding some of those other reasons, well, some of them are similar: the business growth, scalability, the technological advancement, and maybe what you may be doing in-house, and ability to manage and report, to Amit's point earlier on about labor, and also staying relevant to attract employees. If you're banging away on a green street still, which I haven't seen one in a long time, yeah, you might want to up your game there. It may take multiple reasons, and each one should be assigned a level of risk of not doing it versus the benefit of doing something different.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Next question. What are some best practices for evaluating and selecting the right WMS vendor for a business's unique needs? And is there a role that the Magic Quadrant plays in that process? And David, let's take this off with you.
Yeah, I think you got to start with requirements, right? At Alpine Supply Chain, we'll start the process by recommending that there's a best practice assessment, looking at what you're doing, what you could be doing, and also getting into the details, A to Z, from the front of the house to the back of the house. What are your requirements? Not asking how do you do your job today, but what are your real requirements? Using the Magic Quadrant is certainly a starting point. Looking for a specialist, and again, to the point made earlier, look at the fine print in the back, or the following material in the report, because that will help you likely narrow down your decision process and who you want to invite to the party. The vendor demos are really important. A lot of times back in the day, it was 3 days on site where you've got work specialists and consultants from the software provider banging away on scripts, ideally on data that you have provided on the client side, common orders that may ring true, be relevant, inventory items, etc., and help let them go through the process. Since COVID and working from home capabilities don't have to be necessarily on site, but I would suggest chunking it up a little bit. Look at some of the more core processes. What's critical to your business? What are some of the uglier scenarios, right? Talk about microservices. Let them model up something, and you can break it down again virtually. Have them walk through that. But vendor demos are huge from our experience. Don't rely too much on the RFP and the response. If you've got a large selection team on the client side, different people will have different takes on what should be weighted, right? I might weight certain factors from a technical perspective. If I'm the director or VP of IT, right, I may put heavy weighting on what that architecture, how that fits in with my model and my objective. From an operations standpoint, I want efficiency. I want visibility. I want management capability. I want to be able to be proactive instead of reactive. What can I see from a label? Where am I overloaded, and where am I going to see a bottleneck if I don't react now? So,
all right, great.
So please.
Thank you. And Drew.
I think for me, it starts with every operation has what I call force of the tree syndrome on purpose, right? Like your job every day is to get in and get stuff out the door. Find somebody who can come in, sit beside you, learn what you do, and give you feedback that you don't necessarily see, right? Every operation has some uniqueness, but most are pretty darn similar, right? And what you think, we call them sacred cows. What you may think be a sacred cow from a functionality perspective, because you've always done something the same way, may not be. So I think one of the biggest best practices that anybody can do is have somebody come in from the outside, look at the operation, how it's working, stand beside your operators that are doing what they're doing today, listen to the people on the floor, talk about what they like, what they dislike, sit in the room with the team who's managing the IT infrastructure, the upstream data, and just have listening, just take notes and listen and let them come back and give you advice on what they see, right? Because I guarantee you 90% of the time it's going to be starkly different from what you feel, just because every day you're used to doing your job and you're used to doing the same thing. It'll create a more seamless path. You might think it's more expensive, but I'd argue you'll spend more money and time not doing that than you would if you go ahead and invest it on the front end. It'll actually speed up your process. You'll feel more comfortable with your decision. You'll feel more comfortable with what you're doing. The change agent inside the operations, as you change and adapt, to new system will be quicker. There's so much inherent value in it that it's almost, if you overlook that position, you're already putting yourself behind the eight ball.
Yeah, it was such a good point, getting that outside in perspective from an expert, who's objective and seen a lot.
I'd like to kind of piggyback off what Drew just said. Yeah, that having somebody from the outside come in, do that soup to nuts, and from a client side perspective, that also provides the baseline and really the content what they go into an RFP and help drive it. But yeah, I think that's critical.
Yeah, we totally agree. At MadeForNet, we agree. We love it when clients come in and they're working with a consultant because they definitely have a better idea about true goals and scope. One final question before we go to Q&A. We are actually right on time with our discussion here. So the final question we have for today is shifting our focus from WMS selection to implementation. So we've got these four experts here who have done a lot of implementations over their careers. Based on your experience, what's the most common challenge or pitfall an organization faces during a WMS implementation? And Tom, would like to start that off with you.
Yeah, I'll start with two, and these are the kind of the obvious ones. Don't skimp on the testing that's going to be required. All of the different types of testing, end-to-end, functional testing, end user testing, and then don't skip on training. You read any kind of WMS post-mortem on what's right and what's wrong. Oftentimes part of what gets cut is from a budgetary perspective is the training side, and ultimately your end users are going to have this for 10, 20 years, and you cannot skimp on that testing and training side.
Excellent. Drew.
not having internal resources that can support the process. 100% of the time, it's an overestimation of the ability of an organization to juggle multiple large-scale strategies at the same time, and they have one team that's doing 4 or 5 things. With something this critically important to your business and servicing your end customers, you have to have not only internal expertise, but bandwidth. And if you don't, go find it, right? Every WMS implementation that I went through was poor. Tom hit on the testing part, that it seems to be, hey, let's just cut testing short. That's being penny wise and pound foolish when you do that. But the second failure point has been overestimating their ability to actually do the project, right? It sounds good to want to do something, but if you don't have the resources to do it, you're not going to do it right. You're going to spend 3 or 4 times the amount getting it done the right way. So for me, the big one, the most common challenge that I see pitfall wise, just not being prepared internally for what you're about to do.
Excellent. Great. David.
I can't disagree with anything Drew or Tom said. Matter of fact, I would think, my opinion is Drew's major call out about lack of commitment of resources, that top down commitment and their ability to work, do the job on the project execution side actually leads into some of the challenges that Tom mentioned. Not being able to test, not having effective training or organizational change management program.
All right. Good point. And Amit.
You left me last. I don't have much to add, but probably, just kind of reinforce what the 3 gentlemen here said. I would focus on two main points. One, requirements gathering in the design phase of the implementation, right, of the product itself. What is it that you want the system to do? Most customers think that it's just, it's simple. Do receiving, do put away, do picking. That's not the case. It goes into certain details, and you need to really know what you want. And I find it that when there's someone that comes from the outside and has a different point of view and knows to think out of the box, right? Not just be used to how things work at this specific operation. With all the experience, they know what to ask. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think all 3 of you mentioned that, right? There's the testing, the user acceptance test. This is one of the biggest challenges in an implementation, and not because the vendor is not doing a good job in setting it up and testing it. It's the users that think that the vendor tested it or someone else tested it. No, the users need to test it. They need to make sure that the system is performing what they expect to do. It doesn't have anything to do with bugs or it's not working the way it's not configured, or it's not doing exactly the way that they were expecting to have it done. And I think that by doing all these user acceptance testing, they get used to how the system works. It makes more sense to train the end users. And this is when the go live and the launch of the system in a production environment is more successful.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you very much. So thanks to our panel today, and thanks to all of you, the audience, for participating. We do have a few minutes for questions, and we've gotten a few from the audience, and please feel free to continue to send those in. I'm going to start it off with the first question we have today. It's a good one. What is the average cost of a WMS project today? And I'm just going to leave it up to you guys, the experts, to chime in with whoever wants to take that question.
I'll start off, Renee. There's really 2 big components in that SaaS world. Again, you've got your pricing for the software itself, and then you've got your implementation services, which includes the testing and training, which we talked about. Depending on where what vendor you're going to go with. Are you going to be working with your ERP vendors who we saw up in the leaders quadrant, or the tier 1 providers that are up in that leaders quadrant? Their cost per user from that SaaS side could be in the couple $1,000 per user. Again, the vendors are going to have different strategies in pricing it. Is it going to be the total number of users, or is it going to be concurrent users? So you've got to do some due diligence there to understand what that is. And then on the services side, again, you're probably looking at $500,000 to $1 million, be able to do the types of things you do. And again, oftentimes that's going to be dependent on, your type of organization. Are you an e-com with multiple channels, or are you a, 3PL that's moving pallets, which is going to be a much simpler implementation. So, all in all, it's a broad question, and you've got to do your research, based on your industry.
Right. Great. Thanks very much, Tom. Second question we have here is, in terms of labor, are you seeing clients going to the route of a full-blown engineered labor standards versus reasonable expectations?
Oh, I'll take that one, Renee.
Okay.
Good.
All right. Yeah, I'll do this quick. I think that, traditionally when you look at labor management, the biggest hurdle and heavy lifting is about the engineering work, to do all the time studies and build all the formulas and so on and so forth. I think that where systems are going today and the world is going today is deploying and implementing AI where it pertains to labor management. So I certainly think that labor management will become more inherent into the WMS operation. The attributes or the parameters that we usually implement into labor management system, which is mostly a result of time studies and engineering work, will become more seamless within the WMS, and the labor standard will just when you say versus reasonable expectations, I think they'll become the reasonable expectation, because it's just going to be an inherent part of the system.
Okay. Did somebody else
Drew, you
want
wanted
to
to add something?
Yeah, I think that the answer to that question for me determines where the customer is at their current journey. If you're not currently measuring anything, have a reasonable expectations to start measuring, because you'll see benefit. If you've got a very mature operation, things just aren't necessarily getting incrementally better like you'd hoped, then you see those customers go into a more engineered type standard, right? What automation has done is made it simpler for a teammate to do their job. So if you're goods to person station, you have a job. You take something out of a bin that's presented, you confirm it, you put it where it's supposed to go. That doesn't necessarily need the engineered standards of others. What it does do is creates a centralized behavior. And I think that we're seeing more of that happen in the market, where how can I take the complexity out of the steps that the person's doing, make it more simple, so that inherently they're already more efficient instead of worrying about the standards behind it. But again, it goes back to, where are you at now? If you have nothing today, guys, I expect 20 pounds an hour out the door. It's a starting point.
Yeah.
Well, we got 24. Well, we haven't hit our mark yet, right? And now we're going to introduce this type of channel in this process. Just start somewhere. And I think a lot of clients are starting to understand it's okay to go be good, better, best, great. Like, you don't have to start great to get where you're going and get those incremental gains. You don't have to necessarily shoot to be superstars out of the gate, especially if you're on a journey for the first time.
Yeah.
Crawl, walk,
Excellent
run,
points,
right?
Drew. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say crawl, walk, run, right? You start with that reasonable or historical. You maybe work your way up to an engineered labor standard. There's a lot of work in there. It's not just XYZ coordinates, but the preferred or proper methods in training and instruction. And then, ultimately maybe going for a pay for performance. But yeah, I agree with you.
Excellent. Tom?
And I would just kind of close this subject by, labor standards, it's really cultural, right? They kind of grew up in that grocery industry or unionized environments. But as the supply chain got more complex, 3PLs get introduced. 3PLs use it for costing as much as using it for standards, right? So they can take that data and help go take profiles of prospective customers that they want to bring in and have a really good idea of what's going to be the cost to serve from the labor side, and then they can apply their storage models and handling models as well. That's another reason why to consider it. But again, it's cultural, and the nice thing about labor management is you can start off with configuring the WMS to do just reasonable expectations through reporting of units per hour, pallets per hour, and then you can grow into what David was talking about with discrete standards and having XYZ coordinates.
Excellent. Thank you. So we've got about 4 minutes left, and we've gotten a few more questions in here. This next one is an interesting one. As the flexible brain of a warehouse, why or how are SAP and Oracle considered a WMS leader by Gartner? Is it It's certainly a strong warehouse management solution to support their ERP platforms, but certainly not a nimble, configurable WMS platform unless you have a lot of money to customize it. As I explore WMS solutions for our clients, should I consider SAP Oracle as a real option?
I think going back to what I said about the, any surprises, I think, again, those players being there, it's more of a curiosity. I would suggest if your client is already running on Oracle or SAP, you got to certainly consider it. And that would be the only criteria in my mind. I could be wrong. But.
Yeah, David.
Yeah, I'll add. Thanks, Tom. I'll add. I think that most customers that use SAP today, and I agree with what David said about the reason to consider it. Most customers that use SAP today are, SAP is a big monster, right? It's a great system. It's a big monster. You need to have a strong IT to support this and so on. And the biggest fear of an IT leader is integration. So, their assumption when the WM or EWM today from SAP is is a candidate for implementation is that there's no issue with integration, and that's what leads the main driver to implement, in my opinion, to implement the WMS solution. I think the end part of the answer is in the question, right? The dollar amount and the time that it takes to implement SAP WM is huge for both a dollar perspective and a time perspective. Should you consider? I certainly think you should, because in today's world, integration is not such a big deal as it used to be in the past. And there's enough experience and enough knowledge in order to build it in the right way and to configure it in the right way. And then you gain more value from a system that is more nimble, more configurable, more customizable than the standard SAP solution. Hope this helps.
Yeah, I'll go back to what we talked about earlier, document your processes, right? So, in that Gartner model, again, the Magic Quadrant is built around, the number of customers they have and their, the revenues that they're generating and their 3-year, compounded annual growth rate. So that's one of the reasons why they get there is just their behemoth, right? Again, document your processes, understand where you want to get to, and then evaluate in or out.
Excellent.
Renee, one thing, I think it's very important for folks considering those options, though. How does it fit with where I want to be in the future of my warehouse? Do I want other islands of automation? Do I want other processes and so forth? Because inherently they're not as easy to deal with when you're talking about IDOC failures going back to EWM between two subsystems, right? Or anything in Oracle. So I think they have very powerful software. They have a very powerful one throat to choke model, but sometimes it's not the best fit when it comes time to think about where's the future, what I need to be to service my customers.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. We do have a few more questions in the chat. However, we are at time, but never fear. The questions that are in the chat, I got a couple of them about cybersecurity. We've got a couple about testing, like physical floor-based testing versus super user testing. We will provide answers to you, to all attendees in the follow-up. So thank you very much for your questions and your participation. Thank you again to all of our panelists. If you would like a complimentary copy of the Magic Quadrant, you can just go to the Made for Net website and go to our resources page and find it. Otherwise, for all of the registrants of the webinar, we will be sending a follow-up email and we'll give you a direct link there so you don't have to go out and search for it. Also would like to highly recommend reach out to the firms and the panelists that are here today. We work with all of them and highly recommend these experts for any projects that you have. So thank you for your time, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.